Welcome to the Big Mike Fun Podcast, where you'll learn about advanced wealth building strategies from real estate investing to creating massive ROI and secured retirement profits. So pour yourself a cup of coffee, grab a notepad, and lean in, because Big Mike has got the mic, starting now.
Welcome to the Big Mike Fun Podcast. I'm the Big Mike
Zlatnik, and today it is my pleasure and a privilege to welcome back my really good friend, Ryan Parson. Hi, Ryan.
Hi there, Mike. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How is the beautiful Colorado in the middle of the summer?
Well, Colorado, as the saying goes, my friend, you come for the winters, but stay for the summers. It's kind of hard to see this image, but this is right outside my computer in my home office, looking into the backyard, into the Rocky Mountains. So the sun's a little at the right point where it doesn't all come through clear, but I assure you it's nice green weather, clear blue skies, and we've been having a wonderful summer, comparatively speaking, to the rest of the country. It's been nice and cool and nice and rainy, actually, so we've been loving every minute of it.
Yeah, I'm a little envious. It's been hot in New York, so that you guys have better winter and a better summer, I guess. So,
well,
that's why they call it Colorado. It's the most beautiful state in the country, right?
I'm biased, Mike, but this summer has been definitely one of the best I've ever been able to live in out here. So feel very fortunate.
That's awesome to hear. So let's jump straight into the latest and greatest. Obviously, Sunlight Peaks is an RIA, and you have many great services. One of the services that we've chatted about is personal CFO. And tell us a little bit about this. I think you have some slides to share, and just talk it through that it's going to come out in the audio format. Let the folks hear it as well as see it for those who are watching it.
Sure. So thanks for having me, Mike. It's always a pleasure to be here with you and your listeners. I'll share just a couple of screens, but keep this conversational as you and I always do. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Ryan Parson with Sunlight Peaks Financial Partners. And as Mike mentioned, I work exclusively with high net worth families that are primarily in the alternative investment and the real estate investment space. And so today we'll just be chatting a little bit about, as Mike mentioned, what is a personal CFO and what does that mean for the do-it-yourself family? So no tax advice, investment advice, legal advice, anything of that nature here. So we'll just have a nice conversation, and anything I can do to help provide a second opinion or any other thoughts on anything, glad to have a conversation with any of you that may find that to be helpful. So Mike, this is a topic that you and I have talked about for years, and what this means for what I call the do-it-yourself family and the do-it-yourself investor. And you and I in the real estate space, in the alternative investment space, both personally and what we do professionally here. This idea of the do-it-yourself investor has really come to fruition over the last decade, really since the Jobs Act came to be back in 2013 and 2014, and allowed private deal sponsors, private real estate sponsors, really any sponsor or asset manager in the alternative investment space to bring their offerings to the public, so long as the investor is an accredited investor. And that has really given rise to then what I call this do-it-yourself family and do-it-yourself investor, because not only because of the Jobs Act from nearly a decade ago now, but the ease of transferring information because of the internet and so many other things, it's given rise to this type of investor that can really go do a lot of things regarding their investing themselves. And what we've noticed, Mike, over that last decade, and in myself having the good fortune and the good privilege of working with the do-it-yourself families, is that it's become very apparent that there, in addition to investing, there's so many other components and so many other elements that a family like this has become aware of, in a lot of cases has painfully become aware of, whether it's tax related issues, whether it's wealth succession or wealth transfer related issues, how these alternative investments and real estate investments integrate with a charitable giving plan, if that's important to a family, as well as the wealth protection side of things. In other words, given this day and age that we're living in, with all the chaos regarding economics, politics, social elements that are taking place all around us, both here at home and domestically, and globally, I should say, it's really created a whole new landscape for the do-it-yourself investor that didn't exist a decade ago when the Jobs Act first came on the scene. And that's where we have really found ourselves in what I call defending the do-it-yourself family and the do-it-yourself investor, because I still very firmly believe that you have to, as a high net worth family, still control your wealth largely. In other words, you can't abdicate control of it to anybody else. And so there's a whole new landscape and a whole new set of circumstances, I believe today, Mike, that really solid asset managers like you and your team at Tempo understand. But frankly, when the whole wide landscape of asset managers, since so many new ones have come up on the scene since 2012, it's become very blurred for the do-it-yourself family to really start to ascertain what makes a good deal for them, what makes good, what if really promotes what the family is all about and what the family's desires are with their overall wealth.
So thank you, Ryan, for that great overview. So the fundamental question is, you help families, I guess, go through this jungle of deals, how they fit their financial plans, and also how it fits in their legacy planning and other elements, obviously tax planning. So put it all together. So as a personal CFO in a do-it-yourself model, and I think do-it-yourself model is the reality for high net worth folks until I don't know what level of wealth they have to reach when they abdicate and just turn it over. And who do they turn it over? Anyway, that's the other question. So it's almost like you have to do it yourself until some really, really high net worth. I don't know what that number is, at which point you turn it over to some professionals. So let's just start with the basics. Most families have high net worth of what? A few $1 million to 20, 30, 40, 50. And how do you start with them? How do you basically engage, and what are the most simple steps to get them rolling?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Mike, that any high net worth family begins to ask themselves at some point in time. And if you step back, when you got to the point of becoming high net worth, anything over, say, $1 million or $2 million of personal net worth, generally for most families, Mike, they got there by working hard. They may have had some sort of an entrepreneurial business they were in. They may have been a corporate America executive, but chances are they didn't inherit it. They didn't win the lottery. They didn't have an insurance payout. They were just following whatever path they felt they were called to be following in their life, however they got to there, and all of a sudden got to become a little wealthy along the way. And then somewhere along the way, then once they realize they have an amount of personal net worth, became apparent to them that they needed to be in something other than just traditional stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, or in other words, publicly traded investments. And they said to themselves, look, I want to have more control. I want different types of investments in my portfolio that bring different types of opportunities to me, and then hence enter the wide world of alternative investments. And particularly real estate type of investments. And as those desires for an investor or high net worth family begin to enter into the equation, they start to realize, Mike, that there's more complexity to their situation than maybe just from an investment selection itself or themselves that it tends to bring in. And a family, when it comes to realizing these complexities, it's not so much the size of the balance sheet, Mike, but the number of moving parts on that balance sheet. That, are they still operating, have an ongoing operating business of any sort? Are they still, working in corporate America? Are they taking care of parents? Are they still taking care of kids? Do they have charitable aspirations that they're working on? I mean, it could be a whole number of things, but it generally starts off with the complexity of the balance sheet and complexity of the personal balance sheet, and how much of all of this are you able to stay on top of? And as you know, Mike, as an asset manager in your own right, when you have various different accounts, all different kinds of holdings, different deals you're doing within your various funds, it's really no different for a high net worth do-it-yourself family. You get to a point in time where you realize, I just cannot stay on top of all of these moving parts myself. And you start to ask yourself the question, who are the allies that I need as part of my family? It could be a family member. It could be some other type of professional, an accountant, an attorney, personal CFO, as the case might be, that you start to integrate to help relieve some of the pressures that come with being a high net worth family. So, Mike, I hope that you ask a great question. When does a family find themselves? So hopefully that provides some context around that.
Yeah, it does. It makes total sense. The way to think, you gave a great answer, that it's a complexity of the balance sheet. And the best way I can compare it as a fund manager, as we have a lot of alternative investments, what we do day in and day out. The more investments we have, the more items we have on the balance sheet, and the more ongoing monitoring, or financial and operating monitoring, we have to do of these investments to make sure that they are performing well. Can I mention the same thing on an individual level? The more investments you have, the more you have the need for a personal CFO. And it's not just investments, but it's also liabilities, other complexities, and I can see that. So let's continue to dive. So how do you just walk us through a personal CFO? How do you work with clients? What do you do for them? Give me some examples of the services you render. At the end of the day, I guess you're simplifying their life and you're trying to save them precious time. And that's probably the most valuable commodity they can get. And also turning over critical personal financials to a trusted party. Which is critical.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, Mike, because it really is all about the time. And I've certainly been on my own journey with this and my own financial independence, and in realizing, knowing what is my calling in life. Why do I do what I do? Why do I feel called what I do? And I just said to several of our families who were here in Glenwood Springs just this last week, prior to you and I recording this podcast episode, Mike. I said, given all the economic, political, and social chaos going around us, all of us, at various levels and varying different degrees, how do you stay focused on what I call living your best life, or living your best life of significance? In other words, doing what you want to do when you want to do it, having the autonomy to go do it. And so I challenged all of our families to think about, what is that, just the one word, be very essential, be very just grassroots. What is that one word? And that one word really for me, Mike, is lifestyle. And, Webster defines lifestyle in the way in which a person or a group of people lives. And while all of that is true from Webster's perspective, I've got my own definition of it, Mike, and it really has to do with having that true freedom. As you mentioned, your time, and the time to enjoy it at your leisure, nobody else's mandate. That's followed up by being able to gladly march to the beat of your own drum, because for most high net worth families, the do-it-yourself investors, do-it-yourself families, they've been marching to the beat of their own drum their entire life, because that's really what made them the success they are. In other words, they're not following a prescribed path. And really, those paths are about the ability to explore those roads or explore those paths less traveled And frankly, Mike, at least for a lot of the families that we work with and get to serve, they create their own roads. They create their own paths because just following something prescribed or what society tells you to do, or all these pressures that everyone faces, they're creating their own roads so they can feel truly and completely fulfilled with whatever their life's callings are, and that's so wide, it's so diverse, it's so big. But yet for most high net worth families that choose to or start to realize that having a personal CFO in their worlds, it's really about living their best lives and having the time to go do it, which is a far different Mike, than abdicating wealth or giving up control. In some parts, and for some families, there's some elements that require that for a variety of reasons, or all of a sudden there can be a significant life event that causes an incapacity or maybe a death of a family. They might need to temporarily have somebody else making decisions, but largely high net worth do-it-yourself families want to be and are in full control. And this is why whatever you call traditional financial planning, might be it the life insurance agent calls themselves a financial planner, the banker calls themselves a financial planner, the stockbroker everyone wants to call themselves a financial planner, yet none of that serves this do-it-yourself high net worth family. And that's why I feel so strongly and feel so passionate about bringing that personal CFO type of dimension, because frankly, it's the path that no one has crossed or desired to cross, because no one has really figured out how to cross it and work with that do-it-yourself family. But it really starts with understanding what is your best life first, because it's after a while, it's not even so much about the money, it's the issues, it's the concerns that a family has far outweighs any solution that anyone could ever bring to them. And that's usually what gets lost in all of these worlds: the banker, the stockbroker, the asset manager, the life insurance agent, you name it, Mike. This flurry of people that are out there trying to do this get lost in, because they're usually trying to sell a product. They're usually trying to make a commission on something, they're trying to sell something that is not necessarily commensurate with what a high net worth family is really trying to serve, or at least with the understanding of what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, that makes great sense. I mean, everything you mentioned are one-trick ponies. That's the best way to put it. They have one trick: life insurance, whole life. They could sell you a good policy. The challenge is that it only has one dimension. And yes, a lot of these folks are commissioned, and they will be selling you stuff that generates that commission. So going back, I think they need a centralized resource, a centralized brain that can help them get organized. And I assume that's what the personal CFO is, just to get the whole life story or lifestyle well understood, and then everything else to revolve around that. So let's just go into some examples. Mm-hmm. So how would you start working with a family? Let's just say they have sufficiently complex situation with parents, mm-hmm. some issues with kids. Say sick kid, aging parent. They have great business that they have sold, and they are in that position where there is good high net worth. There's a good amount of capital, but they have a lot of challenges they have to solve with this capital, and also maintain lifestyle. That's the magic word. So how do you start working with them? What process?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mike, because it all speaks to what I call defending these types of investors and these types of families. Because like what you were just mentioning with some of these other professionals, who don't mean any harm, Mike, the accountant, the life insurance agent, they don't mean any harm. They just don't necessarily know all the complexities to bring all of it together. And so that's why a lot of high net worth families find that to be a disappointing type of experience. Like you say, sometimes it's a one-trick pony and there's not an understanding of it. So they may have some folks on their team that are really just delivering. It's not disappointing, it's a step up. But then it's really getting to realizing beyond all of these things, why this defending the family and incorporating everyone on the team, which is what I call the personal advocacy part of what a personal CFO does, is helping to make sure everyone on there, from tax to estate, to the asset managers that are managing the money and doing the deals, so to speak, are all rowing the ship in the right direction, Mike. And so that really starts with understanding the family at a very deep level, about their values, about their goals, processes they like to follow, who are all of the true stakeholders, whether it's family related, whether it's non-family related, and making sure that everyone is on the same page with why we're doing what we're doing. So a big part of when you decide you might need to integrate a personal CFO into and with your family is recognizing some of those complexities, but that it's knowing more so what the family wants to accomplish, the interests, the processes, and really be able to have a good solid understanding of that. Because otherwise, Mike, what tends to happen, there's just what I called silo pieces of information that come along, and sometimes families are just looking at one issue or one individual issue. And it's not to say that that issue doesn't need to be addressed or looked at, but you have to usually make it within the context of the holistic understanding of what the family wants, what the whole financials of the family are, and where the family's trying to go. Because otherwise, Mike, as we know, working with high net worth do-it-yourself investors, and as you and I both have for so many years, sometimes the shiny object syndrome becomes very apparent, and investors make a siloed decision because they see what they believe to be a solution, and it could be a solution for that issue, but it simultaneously creates problems elsewhere into the family's plan that they didn't even anticipate before. And that's one of the things that we see time and time again when we're looking at and considering working with a new family is, what are all of these decisions that we're considering needing to make? And what kind of an impact will it have on the long-term success for the family based on whatever they're trying to do? And that's an example, Mike, of what is very paramount. Most families that would come to us have some sort of a desire to sustain the wealth over multiple generations, or through charities, or just they see themselves, or they see their wealth beyond themselves. And so there's generally something to do with that. And there's oftentimes so many structures that are set up and put in place that actually prohibit a successful transfer of wealth, either because taxes haven't been adequately considered, just because there's been unintentional blockades created to some, very what are really minor things, but can be very devastating when there's ex-spouses or ex-spouses of children that are still left inside the plan that the wealth ends up moving to, that there was never any intention for that to continue. So those are just some examples, Mike, that get in the way that we see when we're looking at, that's the silo effect that I'm talking about, some shiny object type of syndromes that I'm talking about. In other words, there's just no one overseeing all the parts along the way to help prevent disasters like that from happening. But more importantly, helping to see opportunities, Mike. And, one of the things, especially for the do-it-yourself family, where either the wealth is the business, or there's some other operating business in place, that we don't take advantage. A lot of times high net worth do-it-yourself families, because of just other sets of circumstances that get in the way, don't really fully get to appreciate how to make the tax code work for them. And what I mean by that, the tax code is generally favors business owners and charitable planning. And if you are a business owner of any kind operating that, oftentimes we see do-it-yourself families not fully leveraging both their operating business and their private alternative, especially real estate investment portfolio, as powerfully as they could if there wasn't, or if I should say, if there was a better connection and a better bridge between the two than seeing those two objectives in silos. So those are a couple of examples, Mike, where we see high net worth families that can create a lot more efficiency than maybe what they're otherwise doing. And those are some examples of why having a personal CFO in play can be helpful to bridge some of those gaps.
Yeah, that makes sense. So just again, how would folks reach out to you and what do you typically start? Do you because everything you explain, like peeling the onion, it's probably the problem could be very complex. And how do you start the conversation? How do you go through this whole discussion? Because unless they have a simple situation, which is unlikely for them to reach out, if they're reaching out, they got a pretty complex situation. You got to peel the onion. You have to understand what's really what real problem they're trying to solve. They may be fixing a symptom. It's like I go into a doctor, something hurts, but in reality, you got a bigger problem behind it.
Yeah, that's so true, Mike. And in part where that whole element starts, I'm going to actually try to maybe or hopefully keep sharing my screen here. My contact information might be up there for you to be able to see that. But what it really begins, Mike, we have a pretty deliberate, what I call a pre-enrollment process, and it really just starts with an exploratory call. To be able to actually have a conversation with a family and just really assess whether it's going to be a good fit, and to continue the conversation to our full discovery meeting that we begin mind mapping with the family there to understand their values and goals, their concerns, who all the stakeholders are, and really start to map that out. And what families are very pleasantly surprised during that conversation, Mike, is to finally start to see their complexities all on one page. And it's not necessarily just the financial complexities. When you start to bring lifestyle, family, and wealth matters together, it becomes very helpful to start to see that in a way that we as high net worth do-it-yourself investors tend to think. Because then from there is when we're able to keep assessing, all in the spirit of if it's being a good fit. And anytime, Mike, we're working with a new family during pre-enrollment, it really is all determining, is it going to be a good fit? This is a very important relationship. It's very delicate. It's very intimate. It's very involved. And we're just trying to figure out through our very deliberate process, are we going to be a good fit? And if we're not, how they continue to work with the existing professionals on their team, or where we may be able to refer them to other professionals that could be a better fit. So from those discovery conversations to information gathering, Mike, we also have what we call our values and behavioral alignment, which is part of an assessment and discussion about how your values and your behaviors integrate with your wealth. And it's a fascinating step in the process, all to help determine how you see your money, how you behave about money, because this is a big reason why high net worth families actually lose their money, Mike. And as you know, 94% of high net worth families don't have the wealth after the third generation. And in today's world, my own family included, there's 4 generations still alive. So understanding the behaviors that go around it within the family are really critical. So those are just all examples, Mike, of not examples, just part of the process that we go through to try to help determine where a family is at, help them see some of the initial findings, the initial gaps, and really understand the complexity that they have, but to start to break that down into more bite-sized steps as they make selections going forward of who needs to be on their team of professionals.
Thank you, Ryan, for sharing that. So again, for the audio audience, for the audio folks, what is the phone number that folks should text you, and then the website?
Sure. Mike, if any of your listeners want to reach out to me, always glad to have a conversation. You can reach out to us on our website, sunlightpeaks.com, or feel free to text me 480-284-4806.
Thank you kindly, Ryan. Appreciate you sharing. Appreciate your service to the folks and the great work that you do to help these folks. It's not for everyone, but for the right family, it makes a lot of sense. And as you said, I guess the process of selection is critical. It's a two-way street. If you're not happy with, I know, knowing you and your team, you're very selective of the folks who you work with. So if you don't think it's a good match, you're just going to say thank you, but let us not waste your time and waste our time in a nice manner. But that is a better conversation than try to get involved and fix something that's not a good match. So it makes total sense. Sunlightpeaks.com. Once again, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. Always appreciate you, and enjoy the beautiful summer in Colorado.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate being here with you.
Thank you for listening to the Big Mike Fund Podcast. To receive your copy of Mike's How to Choose a Smart Real Estate Fund book, head to BigMikeFund.com or visit Amazon and type Mike Zlotnick. Keep listening and keep investing Big Mike style. See you on the next episode.